There have been several NHL players who have forced rule changes either through their exceptional skills, unique playing styles, or controversial actions on the ice. Here are some of the best examples. Wayne Gretzky. Gretzky, often considered the greatest player in NHL history, forced a number of rule changes during his career. In the early 1980s, Wayne Gretzky's Edmonton Oilers had the top skaters and scorers in the league. They'd like to have more room on the ice than 5-on-5 hockey would allow, so they would instigate penalties, leaving 4 skaters on each side. The league changed the rule in 1985 so that when offsetting penalties occurred, teams still played with a full roster. The offending players still sat in the penalty box and remained there until the first whistle after their penalties were over. Gretzky said publicly that he thought this was a bad idea, so the rule became informally known as the Gretzky Rule. The rule was later rescinded in 1992. Bobby Orr. Orr revolutionized the game of hockey with his offensive-minded play as a defenseman. He forced several rule changes, including the introduction of the two-line pass, which restricted passes from a player's defensive zone beyond the center red line. This rule change was made to try and limit Orr's ability to make long passes to his forwards, which he was famous for. Later on, the inception of the neutral zone trap had the league reconsider and eliminate the two-line pass rule during the 2004-05 lockout. Brett Hull. Brett Hull, a former NHL player and Hall of Famer, is famously known for forcing a rule change in the NHL in the late 1990s, specifically regarding the use of skate blades in the crease. In the 1999 Stanley Cup final between Hull's Dallas Stars and the Buffalo Sabres, Hull scored the series-winning goal in triple overtime of Game 6. However, controversy surrounded the goal, as Hull's skate was in the crease when he scored. At the time, NHL had a rule that stated that a goal would be disallowed if an offensive player had his skate in the crease before the puck entered the net. However, there was also a foot in the crease rule that stated that a goal would be disallowed if any part of an offensive player's body was in the crease before the puck entered the net. After much debate and controversy following the 1999 Stanley Cup final, the NHL made a rule change in the following season, commonly known as the Brett Hull Rule. The new rule stated that as long as the puck entered the net before an offensive player's skate entered the crease, the goal would count. This rule change was intended to prevent controversial disallowed goals like Hull's and ensure that the game's outcome was not determined by a technicality. Therefore, Brett Hull's controversial goal in the 1999 Stanley Cup Final played a significant role in changing the NHL's rules regarding the use of skate blades in the crease, which has since been known as the Brett Hull Rule. Jacques Plante. Plante was a goaltender who is widely credited with introducing the use of a goalie mask to the NHL. Prior to Plante's decision to wear a mask in a game in 1959, goalies did not wear any protective headgear. Plante's innovation eventually led to the widespread use of masks among goaltenders. Sean Avery. Sean Avery, a former NHL player, forced a rule change in 2008 by using a controversial tactic during a playoff game. Avery, who was playing for the Dallas Stars at the time, stationed himself in front of the New Jersey Devils goaltender, Martin Brodeur, during a power play and began waving his arms and stick in an attempt to distract him. Avery's actions were not illegal at the time, but they were seen as unsportsmanlike and disrespectful. The NHL's Rule Committee quickly moved to address the issue, and a new rule was introduced that prohibited players from facing the goaltender and waving their arms or stick in an effort to distract him. The rule change was known as the Avery Rule, and it remains in effect today. Avery's controversial tactic was not well received by many in the hockey community, but it did lead to a change in the rules aimed at promoting fair play and sportsmanship on the ice. Ken Dryden. Dryden was a goaltender who forced the NHL to change the size of the nets after he won the Calder Trophy as Rookie of the Year in 1971. Dryden's large size, he was 6'4", made it difficult for him to cover the entire net, so he argued that the nets should be made wider to make it easier for goalies to make saves. The NHL eventually agreed. The size of the nets was increased from 4 feet by 6 feet to 4 feet by 8 feet. Joni Pitkanen. Joni Pitkanen, a former NHL defenseman, was involved in a play that led to a rule change in 2013 aimed at improving player safety. Pitkanen was playing for the Carolina Hurricanes during a game against the Washington Capitals when he was hit into the boards by Capitals forward Troy Brouwer, while the two raced for the puck during a potential icing. The impact of the hit caused Pitkanen's skate blade to get caught in the boards, and he suffered a serious injury to his heel that kept him out of action for the remainder of the season. The incident prompted the NHL to take a closer look at the safety of the boards in its arenas. As a result, the NHL decided to change its rule from touch icing to hybrid icing. That makes icing a race to an imaginary line across the face-off dots instead of the puck. The rule change was designed to reduce the number of dangerous collisions into the boards. Martin Brodeur. Brodeur, one of the greatest goaltenders in NHL history, revolutionized the position by becoming the first goalie to regularly leave his crease and play the puck. His ability to handle the puck effectively led to the introduction of the trapezoid rule in 2005, which restricts where goaltenders are allowed to play the puck behind the net. And Brodeur is also involved in another prominent rule change. Alexander Ovechkin broke into the NHL wearing a mirrored visor, but it went away in favor of tinted visors after a few seasons. The reason why? In 2006, several players complained about Ovechkin's mirrored visor, the most notable of those being goaltender Martin Brodeur, who claimed it gave Ovechkin an advantage because his eyes could not be seen. NHL GMs voted in favor of banning the visors, but that never became an official part of the rulebook. Jaromir Jagr. Jagr, a prolific scorer and one of the greatest players of his generation, forced the NHL to change the way it measured players' sticks. Jagr was known for using an unusually long stick, which gave him a greater reach and made it easier for him to handle the puck. However, his stick was eventually deemed illegal by the NHL because it exceeded the league's maximum length limit. Max Pacioretty. In March 2011, Pacioretty, a forward for the Montreal Canadiens, was checked into the boards by Boston Bruins defenseman Zdeno Chara during a game. The hit caused Pacioretty to suffer a severe concussion and a fractured vertebrae in his neck, which forced him to miss the remainder of the season. The incident sparked a debate about player safety and the need for stronger rules and regulations to prevent similar injuries in the future. In response, the NHL introduced the Pacioretty rule for the 2011-12 season, which requires all arenas to have stanchions installed between the players' benches and the end boards to prevent players from being hit into the exposed edge of the boards. The rule change was designed to reduce the risk of serious head and neck injuries for players and has been credited with making the game safer for athletes. Rob Ray. Rob Ray is a beloved former enforcer for the Buffalo Sabres. During fights, due to how he wore his equipment, Ray's jersey and shoulder pads would quickly be shed from his opponents clutching and grabbing. This would result in his opponents no longer able to grab onto him, giving Ray a distinct advantage. This assisted Ray to control nearly every fight he was in. Fellow Sabre Brad May often employed this technique as well. As a result of this practice, the NHL created a new rule that specifically states that a player who engages in fisticuffs and whose sweater is not properly tied down and who loses his sweater in that altercation shall receive a game misconduct. What are some additional rule changes you'd like to see the NHL make?